I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want.
So tell us what you want, what you really, really want.
I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want.
So tell us what you want, what you really, really want.
I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want.
So tell us what you want, what you really, really want.
I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want.
So tell us what you want, what you really, really want.
I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want.
So tell us what you want, what you really, really want.
I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want.
So tell us what you want, what you really, really want.
Tales of Arise.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Tales of Arise new news discussion. This part is going to be all about combat. We covered everything from story and characters and exploration, map, everything in part 1, so please go and watch that first, unless you are just not interested in anything the game has to offer apart from combat, but you should be because Tales is so much more than just combat. But we are going to focus on combat, and it is its own video because there's just so much to cover. I think this is probably going to be longer than the other one, which covered so much more stuff. So with that in mind, let's just jump straight in. Combat is still encounter based. We've known this for a very long time, and by that we mean that there are monsters sort of roaming about the world, about the field maps, but running into one transports you to a battlefield where there are multiple enemies and you fight the enemies. There is a big change here though, and we will talk about that a little bit later. Once you get into the combat, a lot of people were worried about the linear motion battle system. So LMBS is essentially what the Tales of system has been. It's been through many changes and each entry brings its own unique sort of spin to the system, but it's always kept with this philosophy of being in line with an enemy. For a very long time, a lot of entries, free running, as in being able to just run around anywhere you want, either wasn't possible or wasn't the default way of moving. So you had to actually hold down a shoulder button if you wanted to move freely rather than in line with the enemy you were targeting. A lot of people were worried that that's sort of gone, but I really don't think that's the case. From the limited footage we have at the moment, you can still see elements of the linear motion battle system when you're attacking. You appear to remain in line and locked on to the target. So free running may be the default now, so you don't need to hold down a shoulder button, you can just run about the battlefield, but it appears as though once you start attacking, you stay in line with the enemy to continue comboing. And it even looks like the dodge mechanic, which is a much larger part of this system than in previous games, works with this LMBS-like function, because the way you dodge appears to again keep you in line with the enemy. You dodge to the side, but you're staying perfectly in line with the enemy. So I don't really think that the linear motion battle system is gone. It's just a different interpretation or a different implementation of it. That's sort of the most important part of LMBS anyway. LMBS is good because it keeps you in line with the enemy when you're attacking, so you don't have to, worry about, oh, now I'm doing half a combo off to the side because the enemy got knocked in the other direction. And it appears like that is in Tales of Arise. Now, Tomizawa has said that a big focus for the combat in Tales of Arise is they wanted players to focus less on gauges and bars and HUD elements and instead focus on the action and the enemy's movements. Whereas in previous games you were much more likely to block an attack or backstep out of range, in Arise you'll be able to dodge telegraphed enemy attacks and continue your combo. So, for example, where you might have a sequence like normal attack, art, block, which is a complete combo in a lot of other Tales games, in Arise you might have something like normal attack, dodge, normal attack, art, dodge, art, that kind of thing. So it's just a lot more dynamic. It's less about, just doing one combo and then blocking or dodging and then doing another combo and blocking and dodging. You can dodge and continue a combo. And I think it's also important for that philosophy of wanting the players to not, be glued to looking at like HP bars and mana bars or technique or TP bars and stuff like that. They want you to keep your eyes on the action because that's the most interesting part. So I think that's a good way of doing it, you know, making the enemies have these very heavily telegraphed moves that you can dodge keeps our eyes on that and the action and the most interesting part. Now that goal of minimizing the focus on HUD elements looks to be carried over to much of the rest of the game. Some comments on part 1 of this discussion were concerned that the UI in general looked very minimalist, but you probably don't want to have a big open screen so you can focus on the eye candy when in combat, then revert to an overcrowded UI out of combat, if it can be avoided of course. So we obviously haven't yet seen all of the UI or the menus, and it is also possible that the parts of the UI and menus we have seen so far were trailer-friendly versions that don't actually give us a complete picture just yet. You know, they could be heavily cut down from the one that we get in the final game. So overall, I really don't think this system is a huge departure from other Tales games. Each Tales game has introduced a couple of unique mechanics to the battle system, and the underpinnings and the mechanics of the linear motion battle system have changed many times over the years. Like I mentioned earlier, it does in fact look like the LMBS mechanics are here, they've just been implemented in a more fluid way. Nevertheless, Tomizawa has mentioned previously that there will be a mode available for people who have difficulties with action combat systems, and this will likely amount to an option to have your character auto-dodge or something like that. I think that's an important accessibility feature and will allow people with disabilities, impairments, or just bad reflexes to take part in combat the way it was intended, i.e. attacking and dodging. Normal attacks, arts, chain arts, and mystic arts are all confirmed alongside Arise's unique mechanics known as Boost Attack and Boost Strike. Boost attacks are support actions that can be used when certain conditions are met. Each character has a different boost attack, and each boost attack has a different condition or criteria to be used. They will apparently be one of the ways to create or continue a combo. Boost strikes, on the other hand, are finishes. Once you've lowered the enemy's HP to basically 0, you can finish them off with a boost strike. These are kind of like a conditional mystic art, but they are separate from mystic arts. They involve the whole party, and the boost strike scene will change depending on the characters involved. This seems to me, having not really seen this yet in any of the trailers, to be a very elegant and neat way to bring in some of those awesome character interactions that were previously in victory screens, since victory screens will not be in Tales of Arise. Yeah, so that was the thing I alluded to much earlier in the video. There are no victory screens, which might seem like a big change, but it's not really. The characters will still have post-battle interactions that play out in the field, much like the really great character interactions that would play while you were just running around in Zestiria. Possibly the one thing in Zestiria that was just done so well compared to the rest of the series. The number of interactions and variety is said to have been increased substantially in Arise for these post-battle interactions, and you have to remember that while there are some really adorable victory screen scenes in previous Tales games, the vast majority of victory screens were just the characters in static poses reading out a few lines of dialogue. These essentially aren't going away, they'll just play out in the field now, and that handful of examples where the victory screens involved actual animation can be inserted in a number of places. Boost strikes being a great way to do such a thing, as previously mentioned, but obviously I don't know if that will be the case for boost strikes specifically. The removal of victory screens is for quite a simple reason. They've kept the encounter-based combat but still want to make playing the game, exploring and moving between objectives a more seamless experience. So instead of bringing up a big screen at the end of every battle, you just fade back into the field straight away with hopefully plenty of fun post-battle dialogue to listen to as you continue on your way. Something else that's returning, but in a slightly different, more seamless way, is character switching. You've pretty much always been able to change which character you're controlling in battle, but sometimes this was a long, convoluted process involving multiple menus. Now you can switch the character you're controlling on the fly with the press of a button. This does seem to come at the expense of another feature though, so let's move on to the big thing that won't be returning in Tales of Arise: co-op multiplayer. Well, I say big, I should say big for some, and maybe even some is overstating it a little. I just want to come out now and say that I really truly sympathize with those of you out there for whom the co-op functionality of previous Tales games was important. I have heard a handful of stories now about couples and such being able to enjoy the games together more easily thanks to the co-op battles. It sucks for you guys that you won't be able to do this in Tales of Arise, and I do encourage you to speak up if this feature was important to you, especially if you'd like to see it return in future entries. Having said that, we've also got to be a little realistic here. Tales has always been first and foremost a single player experience. Co-op wasn't around when the series began, it isn't in any of the handheld entries, even the main series ones, it isn't even in all the home console entries. Sometimes co-op wasn't in the game until it was remastered on a different platform, and in a lot of cases the functionality isn't even well implemented or thought out. In some entries it's not available until later in the game, in some entries you actually lose important combat functions by using co-op, in others the camera only follows the first player, and the list goes on and on. As far as I know, they've never expressed any interest in making the series as a whole anything other than predominantly a single player RPG experience. The multiplayer co-op functionality has been like a vestigial feature for years now. I'd wager there are more people who've played Tales games that didn't even know that co-op existed than there are people who actually use it. I think the only real reason it's been in so many home console main series titles is because they very rarely ever change engines. There's only really been 3 major engine changes or updates for the main series over its 25-year life. The last 5 Tales entries have all been built using this same engine with the same foundational code, and since it was implemented in that first Tales game that used this engine, that feature then had native support in this engine that they continued to use for the next 7 years. And you can see that it really was more of a, well, it's natively supported, so let's just enable it kind of decision than it was any kind of priority, because among these titles is Exilia and Zestiria, both of which have less than ideal implementations that can actually limit or block the use of their unique combat mechanics. So again, I do sympathize with the people that are affected by this removal, but I don't really think it affects Tales of Arise and whether or not the game is going to be good. The series has undergone much larger changes and removals in the past that affected the large majority of players, and the series continued to prosper. The removal of a scarcely used, often poorly implemented novelty feature that definitely wasn't central to the series' focus, philosophy, or design is definitely not going to ruin Tales of Arise, much less the series as a whole moving forward. And on that slightly somber note, I think it's time to close out this video. I've been considering a kind of unofficial part 3 where I discuss some interesting little things about the story, characters, and what's been hinted at, like the fact that Rinwell is a mage, but she is from Dana. Dana being the world where magic has essentially been extinct for 300 years. So if you'd like to see that video, let me know down in the comments below. I'll also have all the sources and trailer links for everything in this video in a pinned comment down there as well. And I guess I should probably tell you to press the like button, subscribe, yada yada yada. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Hey, this is different and new. Yeah, I'm going to be in end screens from now on. My idea is Patreon is out, coffee is in. You shout me a coffee, put a comment there or a question. I see how many I can read out or answer in this 20 seconds that we get for end screens. That's not fully set up yet though, so I guess I'll just sing.